Hey guys, welcome back to Rudder Innovation, where today we're going to be installing the wiring harness for trailer lights on this Nissan NV 3500. Here we go. First thing you're going to do is you're going to remove this panel by pulling that out. Once you have this cover off, you can unscrew this right here, which will release all of the jack equipment. You don't have to remove the jack itself, but you do need to remove this to access the wiring behind it. This thing will just pop right out, and then I'm going to show you a spot. This is going to come out like this. It tucks underneath this bottom flap. You can just lift that up, or you can pivot it like this and it'll slide out. And then I'm going to show you this spot down here. It'll be coming through the backside. There's a clip right here you can see poking through, and you'll hold this still while you pull on this piece of trim to get it to separate from it. And you most likely are going to have to pull and release the seats to pull it forward. That way you can remove this whole piece of trim. The left side panel is easy to remove and can be done without tilting the seat forward. This part right here was fastened under here. I just picked this up right here, and then there's a little cable that you're going to unplug. This is for that the AC power on the other side, little inverter that's on our van. Disconnect that so we can remove that panel, have better access to where the plug is, which is right in here. The wiring harness that we're using for our trailer lights is from Kurt, model number 56148, which states it works for our vehicle right on the package. All right, what I'm gonna do is pinch this right here and push it in. Then we're gonna remove this wiring harness for the brake light, and we'll take our adapter here and we're gonna plug in this to this side of the vehicle. So we'll push this button in right here, which will remove that. And then we'll plug in the female end to this male end and this end over here. So we'll go ahead and do that now. You should hear an actual clicking. All right, so now we're gonna route this over, all this extra wiring and these plugs over to the brake light on the other side of the vehicle. Next, you can use a flathead screwdriver to remove the 3 plastic plugs that hold on the top piece of trim. Pull downward to release the remaining trim plugs on the top side, and don't forget to unplug the dome light wire to completely detach it from the vehicle. To have room when fishing the wire over the headliner, pull the rear door gasket off at the top. So we're just going to follow this up. We'll just follow it with this wire going over to the other side. We're going to feed it through right there. I'm going to use this stick. You can use a yardstick or something like that. And we're just going to tape the end to it with some electrical tape, and we'll feed it all the way up, and then we'll come all the way over and back down this side, and we'll plug it in over here. And you can see we're already unplugged it. It helps to tape the plugs together so they're less likely to catch on things when feeding it through. I was able to pull the headliner down just a little bit and be able to see it over there, and I used some needle nose pliers to reach it and grab the wire right here, which is going to allow me to pull this over. And I'm gonna run it down this side, and we'll be able to plug it in. When feeding it over the passenger side, I let gravity feed the wire down and grabbed it with my needle nose pliers when I could reach it. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna connect female and male in. You should hear a defined click once you have it. And then I taped them together when I was feeding them through so they wouldn't be so spread apart. And then I'll plug it in right there. We'll just tuck this back. If you want to tape this stuff around these other cables so that it's not all in the way, you can tape that up. The way it won't be just bouncing around in here. Once the wire is fed over, you can reinstall the rear door gasket and top piece of trim that contains the dome light. Don't forget to hook up the wire. Now that the wires are plugged into the factory harness, we're left with the power wire, which is black, and the ground wire, which is white. Down behind the inverter is a hole that leads to the outside of the vehicle that's covered with some thick metal-like tape on the exterior. So we're going to remove the 4 10mm bolts that hold the inverter in place to give us room to work. Here's the location of the hole under the rear fender of the driver's side of the vehicle. I started by making the hole slightly larger with a 1/2-inch drill bit, and then used my Dremel to grind the hole a little larger to accommodate a 1/2-inch plastic conduit that would shroud my wires. Once it was large enough, I put the thick metal-like tape back over the hole and used a razor blade to cut through the tape where the hole was, and then wrapped it around the sharp edges of the metal to further protect the wires and conduit. All right, so the hole is right down there. We fed that black conduit through it. I did some extra trailer wire because it's not gonna be long enough with what they've given me. So I'm just gonna bring it up here and we'll splice it in, and also have that power wire for this module here that I just put right there. So that's gonna connect there. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull all this stuff up here so we can wire it up. Before connecting the power wire, you'll need to disconnect the ground wire from the battery. All right, so I put a 10-12 butt connector on here, and I'm just gonna join this up with the module, and this is coming down from the bottom of the car where we're gonna run it to our battery. Connect this right here, and we'll go ahead and crimp that on. We got a solid connection right there. Here's a better view of the power wire coming from underneath the vehicle that's connected to the module. Now that the power wire and extra trailer wire are run behind the inverter, we can reinstall the inverter and connect the ground wire to one of the screws. Here you can see the trailer wire that comes from the back of the vehicle and goes over the frame into the hole of the fender that comes up behind the inverter. Above the frame is where I slipped the black power wire out of the plastic conduit and went over the frame above the spare tire and followed the rear parking sensor wires to the front of the vehicle, adhering it occasionally with either zip ties or electrical tape. Whenever I made it towards the front of the vehicle, you can see I ran out about right here. So I made it about to the front door. And what I'm gonna do is I have a butt-end connector here, and this is some heat shrink that you can slide over it. So I'm gonna crimp it, and then I'll do the heat shrink, and then we'll keep going. Hopefully we'll have enough to make it the rest of the way. Not coming off at all. We're gonna slide that heat shrink right over it. That's a nice, mostly sealed, clean connection. Once I added my extra length of 12 gauge wire, I was able to finish running it along the existing factory harness behind the wheel well and up into the engine bay. In the engine bay, I came up right there and just kind of zip tied along that wire. I did wrap it around that, which is right at the bottom of these fuses, and then let it along the bottom of that until I got up here. I'm gonna put a little inline fuse that came with my kit. It's a 10-amp fuse on there, and what I'll do is I'm gonna take the wire, we'll feed it through here, crimp it. All right, and that'll go right on our terminal there. And then we need to connect these two wires. I'm gonna use that same heat shrink butt connector that I did down below. We're gonna go ahead and connect our negative terminal on the battery. Pop our fuse in, and we'll check it out and see if it's working. All right, we test our lights. See our lights work. Test your hazard lights. That'll be the blinkers. You can see that rear lights blinking back there, and you can also check your brakes. It's working. All right, we got everything wired up. One of my complaints about this kit, one is the first one that got delivered was dead on arrival. So I set all this up and it was broken. So I had to redo it all. The other thing is that it's not long enough. So this wire coming out of the bottom of here isn't even long enough to go underneath the vehicle to come out here where I wanted it to at the trailer hitch. And so what I did is I just spliced in, I connected another one to it. So you can see here, I just connected the existing one to another plug and just basically use it as an extension cord to go through. And I did cut through so I could go through that tiny hole and then wired it together that way so I could actually fit it without making a big hole. Another thing is that this wire was not long enough for this van, so it's just hanging here. What I would prefer to do is clip it and then mount it on the inside here If it were long enough, it could just go in there and then we could stick it to that flat surface there. But thankfully there's enough room. We're gonna adhere it here. There's some double-sided tape right here that we'll put on the back of here. We'll fit it here, and then we'll get this panel back on, and we're gonna tidy this stuff up. We'll probably zip tie that stuff together. After that, you can reinstall the trim and make sure the door seal is over the trim piece and not being pinched behind it. Then you'll reinstall your jack hardware, push the seat forward, and reinstall the trim for the passenger side. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to comment below. If you like this video, like it. If you're watching on Medium, you can subscribe. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you next time. Peace and God bless.